Hey there, guys. Welcome to another episode of Scaling with SaaS. I'm your host and CEO and founder of Invincible Media, Jonny Shipman. And this week we have Edward Upton, founder and CEO of Littledata. Welcome, Edward. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing well, thank you. Yes.
Good stuff, man. Good stuff. Cool. Well, look, really hot topic this. Looking forward to interviewing you and finding out a little bit more about yourself and Littledata. The super current, very competitive market space. But look, before we go deep into Littledata and what it does, let's start with yourself, Edward. Could you tell us a little bit more about yourself, your background, and what you do, my man?
Yeah, so I run this business. So I started it 9 years ago. It's actually my second SaaS company. So first company I started in my 20s in educational technology space called Teachable.net. And we raised a bit of money. We scaled that to, we got lots of users. We really struggled with kind of monetizing that in the education space. It's quite a complex one to kind of find a business model. Yeah. And so when I got sort of deeper into, through my business, deeper into data analytics and understanding website conversion, I started to advise some clients in London on how to optimize a website. I got more specialist in kind of e-commerce and tracking for e-commerce brands, working with brands like Made.com and FigLeaves.com. And then we found, in 2018, we could take all of this knowledge we built up as consultants and productize it. And so what we launched was basically the first server-side tracking for Shopify brands. So being able to automatically pick up all of the different conversion steps on their online stores, because obviously stores on Shopify have a very standard, kind of process. The design is different, but the steps you're going through similar. And so by productizing that and having a completely self-serve app, we could make it a much lower price point for lots of brands to use. And we've really, just taken it from there, starting with Google Analytics was our first it's an integration, and now we support Google Ads, Meta Ads, TikTok, Pinterest, Klaviyo, Attentive, and we've got Microsoft Ads launching this quarter. So it's really all of the sort of marketing channels you'd need for your online store, using them with accurate conversion data and touch points so that you can both understand how your marketing's working, get better analysis of it, but also to actually power the algorithm so the ads can be better targeted at the users.
Cool. I mean, you wouldn't think that that's an issue. You just think, within Shopify, you've got your reporting. Maybe you're plumbed into Stripe. I mean, from a layman's perspective, you've got all this established SaaS already and all these integrations and these apps and stuff. And you think, well, they should all be talking to each other. I should be getting accurate data.
Yeah.
I'm just picking up on this. I mean, the pain point is that this is not accurate then, and only with the likes of Littledata do you get accurate revenue reporting then. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. So look, it's an interesting question. Why do we exist at all? Why isn't this just solved by Shopify? So there's two reasons. The first reason is that they obviously have their own Shopify analytics that sits within your kind of admin, and obviously all the basic stuff like, how many orders they do today, which products are top selling this month, that sort of stuff you can do very easily, and there's no need to replace that. The thing is, when it comes to actually understanding the whole customer journey, like all the marketing touch points they made before they purchased, Shopify analytics doesn't nearly cut it. It's nowhere close to being a sophisticated tool. So then people need to step out into a more specialist marketing analytics tool or marketing reporting tool like Google Analytics. But then you see Shopify doesn't really have any interest in supporting that. They're not against people using it. They just don't need to build that into their product, because obviously their interest is to keep you in Shopify admin and Shopify Analytics. So what they said is, hey, Google will support that for you. There's this Google app out there. It's called the Google and YouTube app, or a similar thing with Meta. It's called the Facebook and Instagram app. But by the way, those tech companies never heard of that. They don't care about maintaining those. Google isn't in the business of building integrations to all these other platforms. They've got much bigger fish to fry in AI. So the reality is this falls down the cracks. Brands need to use these other marketing channels. Shopify doesn't really have an interest or a priority in integrating with them themselves. And so they absolutely want to leave it to partners like Littledata to provide that accurate gap. So that's kind of why we exist.
Yeah, cool. I mean, where was the, obviously you've discussed your consultancy experience with consulting with D2C e-commerce brands, but then you quickly touched upon that you've seen the problem, then productized this. But talk the Lightbulb moment, Edward. At what point did you think, I can just productize this, I can make this into an app, into a business, into a SaaS tool, boom, go? What were the early days like in checking that product?
Yeah, so I kind of knew from the beginning of, doing the consulting work that I wanted to start another SaaS business. So we were kind of doing on the side, using some of that revenue. That was before I had kids. So it's like my money
Yeah.
was all going in back in the business, right? And so we're experimenting with products. And actually the first ideas were very much around AI insights and like, can you sort of automatically detect when things are happening on the site that the website owner or e-commerce manager should know about.
Yeah.
I think we just found we also had a benchmarking product, and we just found that the retention people were excited about initially, but it's not the kind of tool that people want to come back in month to month for subscribe. And obviously, one of the key things of building successful SaaS companies, you've got to have a sticky product. It's got to be the kind of thing that people just can't do without. Otherwise, you churn in a few months, and there's no lifetime value. So what we sort of discovered is that we were kind of going down the wrong path. We were trying to charge consulting money for doing the actual data setup and all of the plumbing, let's call it, and then charging the insights. But actually, it's the other way around. It's the plumbing, the data plumbing that people actually need to pay for. That's the stuff that's complex and tedious, and everything else is broken if it doesn't work. And actually, there are lots of tools now from Google and others that provide the insights for free. So I guess we just, we flipped that around. That was the light bulb moment. We realized that, look, what we should be doing is making a SaaS business around the actual data setup, data tracking, data accuracy, and then just enabling people to use a free stack of tools on top of that could do the insights.
Stuff. Cool. So I was going to say, talk to me about some key features then. I mean, for the layman that's watching this, for maybe the average store owner, I don't know, D2C brand who's intrigued already, is like, okay,
Yeah.
that's cool. That is a bit of a headache managing all these platforms and finding out, who's buying, when are they coming back, what are they spending? Is this the second, is it the third time purchasing? Just talk to me about some key features. What can it do?
So at a high level, what most brands will be familiar with is if they go into their Shopify admin, they'll see maybe they did £1,000 yesterday of trading, right? But if they go into, let's say, Meta Ads or Google Analytics, they'll go and see £700-800. Suddenly there's a gap, right? So why is there a gap? That's because basically traditionally that tracking is relying on a ping from a thank you page. The user kind of has to get to the thank you page, and then there's a little thing saying this user bought, £50 of stuff, right? But that doesn't work very well in the modern. Over the years, that's become less and less reliable. Browsers block cookies, people use ad blockers, people don't wait for the thank you page to load, people are buying on mobile, and there's basically just no time for the page to load. All of these things add up to mean that year on year, the number of people who are tracked using what's called client-side tracking is dropping. So that revenue gap exists. That revenue gap means that the brand is getting, first of all, from an analytics point of view, you're kind of got a big black hole of stuff. You just don't know where that revenue came from. But also from a targeting point of view, if you go back to Meta Ads, like let's say you only feeding them 70% of the conversions, that means your budget is only 70% optimized, because for all it knows, there could be a great campaign that's performing really well, but you just never track the conversion from that 30%. So yeah, by fixing that revenue gap, by tracking the accurate conversions in, by being able to send all of the first party customer data along with the conversions, we can make sure that those marketing platforms can do their job. So, we're not trying to be a marketing platform, that's a whole nother game. But where we see this moving to is that the likes of Google Ads, Meta Ads, even marketing platforms like Klaviyo, they're becoming more and more kind of autopilot. You, as a brand, you just set your high level objectives, and the platform, the algorithm will figure out who to serve the ad to, when, what format, what creative, right? But it can only figure that out if you're feeding it all of the right conversions to actually sort of know what's working.
Cool. Okay, so how did you identify and validate the ICP?
So I think, like a lot of apps on Shopify, we started with a sort of, what seemed like obviously what I would call a mass market model. You charge that there are, Shopify says they have 5 million active stores. I mean, in reality, that's not 5 million brands, because a lot of those are test stores or country stores, but there's still probably close to 1 million brands trading globally on Shopify. So it's a massive market there. And yeah, the mass market approach is, you charge a cheap price. I think our original app was $20 a month, $19 a month, and you kind of get as many of those as possible. But actually, over time, that's actually a terrible strategy for three reasons. The first thing is that actually, the majority of those brands have even $20 a month is too expensive for them. So their price tolerance is very, very low. You can have a free app strategy, but $20, you're not going to get many users. The second problem is that small stores churn, and they've churned for lots of reasons outside your control. It's not because they don't like the product. Often they're just not stable businesses. They haven't got funding. They haven't got enough customers to pay the overhead, etc. So we see that once brands progress to being beyond about 2 million, we think of dollars because the whole ecosystem in pounds, but turnover, they start to get to a period of stability where you're kind of making like enough margin on that to pay all the overheads and the kind of, actually have a full-time team and all of that thing. And then actually they've become much more stable customers for us. But the third thing is that, as brands scale, they spend more money on ads, they spend more money on acquiring customers. So these problems just become greater. There's greater return on investment because you're saving them more money. So I think for that reason, what the ICP is still broadly an industry, like we can serve brands in any industry as long as they're on Shopify, but it's definitely moved up market. So what we'd say now is the ICP is kind of, 5 to 200 million, dollar business on Shopify. I mean, it could go higher than that. There just aren't that many $100 million companies on Shopify. But there's a massive market. What we think was the upper mid market, which is the sort of 5 to 100 million that are very stable. They have an established niche brand. They're selling whatever it is. Skincare
the
products.
distribution channel is, the supply is in, it's all nailed down, Salesforce.
Yeah. And so we can just come in and just immediately just be this turn on like better data upgrade that they can just, power their marketing more efficiently. So that's kind of where we've got to, is we can still serve the smaller customers. We have flexible pricing. So one of the things we launched, there's two things to actually help with the smaller end of the market. One was a flex plan, basically pay as you go pricing, which is quite cool for brands that have so for a classic example, we have a couple of Christmas tree selling brands. Obviously to scale up, they literally scale up. So they do all their orders in 1 month and then they spin it down again. So we're happy to support them, but the kind of month on month pricing doesn't work for them. And then the other thing we've launched more recently is a free app. So we now have basically a light version of our original Google Analytics connection, because what we've seen in the App Store is that's evolved, and that's the world we're in, Shopify App Store. And you see the same thing with Apple's App Store. You see almost no successful apps that are actually trying to charge an upfront fee. It's all a freemium model, because you've got to get the mechanics work. You've got to get installs and reviews, and that drives a viral mechanism of more installs. And then obviously that user base you can push into the paid model.
Got you, cool. And obviously, the bigger the client, the bigger the black holes, and the more value you can add as well.
Yeah, so we can charge them more, but then they're getting relatively more return on investment.
Yeah, absolutely. All to do with the CAC. Cool. I mean, what were the early days like then, Ed? We've got this productized strategy. You've got your JCP dialed in. You've just got to get this to market. You've got to have conversations. You've got to get demos in. The development.
The last 6 years, I'd be shocked at how, if he told me that take this long to scale the business. I mean, I just thought that stuff would all happen, but organically people just find out about it. They just carry on paying. But no, my word, like 6 years later, we are still growing every year, but it is hard work still. There's a few reasons for that. I mean, in the e-com world particularly, we have this thing which I think I describe as the post-COVID hangover. The world went nuts. I think a lot of agencies suffer from this too, right? Went nuts in 2021. Brands were just throwing money at online. Lots of people rebuilding their stores. Anything that said marketing data, honestly, they're like, yeah, have some of that.
Fighting them off. Subs coming in, dropping in.
I mean, have all these amazing big brands. And I think it was a lot of self-congratulatory stuff going on in the business, going, hey, we're nailing this. I remember my product manager at the time saying, he was talking to his mentor, it's like the kind of, market adoption of it is crazy. Like, you're obviously doing everything right. And it actually just turned out to be timing the market right. So then obviously 2022, 2023, a lot of brands are like, oh shit, we've got all this cost base of all these SaaS products that we don't use or need. And let's take a red line through lots of them. So that's been painful, but I think, our growth story has not been one of venture funding. We've gone the sort of bootstrap route. So we did raise a bit of angel investment back into 2018, 2019 to be able to that was the seed money that enabled us to switch from the sort of services to SaaS business. Because obviously you've got a painful transition there. You've got to weed yourself off the services business model onto pure SaaS. But I think, since then we've just tried to reinvest the money from new customers back into growth. And as I said, it's been consistent, but it's not been exponential.
Well, look, I mean, bootstrapping is always the way. And look, I was going to ask you about some key milestones and big wins, and maybe you could talk about the funding in a bit more detail. It's always a hot topic. Some founders love going through the pitch decks and the rigmarole. Some people are like, oh, John, I dread this. But yeah, I mean, look, when it draws down, it's always a wonderful thing, But look, key milestones, big wins. It could be about funding. It could just be about hitting a certain number of users. It could be winning a big scalp in the marketplace. What do you think?
I mean, so a long period of history. I mean, I think, okay, let's talk about funding milestones. So yes, first of all, like, I said, we closed, I think in a couple of early rounds, we closed about 500,000. That felt pretty good at the time because, we were funding's all relative to the amount of money you're spending. But at the time we had a fairly lean team, I think of, about 6 people, I think, when we started to close the first running round. And so, money's not getting out the door that fast. That feels like it's going to last you a few years. And then I think, as I said, it got a bit hairier. We then raised a bit more money in 2020. It looks like it was all going well. And we made the mistake of over-hiring. And I think a lot of SaaS companies did at the time. It looks like trajectory going up. And so we had this principle, I think we borrowed from some sort of venture capital manual, which is sort of hiring ahead of the curve. The curve's going to give up. So you're just trying to get people in to sort of handle the uptick. But then unfortunately, as I said, times changed. The growth curve didn't come through, churn went up, and we had to go through a bit of restructuring, because I think at that point the problem with funding is you should always raise money when you don't need it, because at the time when you actually do need it, it's almost inevitably the time when no one wants to give it to you. So we went out to market.
Good advice just to drop that in real quick, Edward. That's the
Yeah.
killer line. Brilliant.
You got to raise money. At the peak of sort of euphoria and expectation. Don't wait for the actual reality of business growth to hit in, because that's when investors will punish you. So anyway, we weren't able to close money in 23. We took the other route, which is to get back to the sort of bootstrapping and profitable growth. And after a year of adjustment, I'm pleased to say we got there at the end of last year. And so now feels good that we've got, that's, I guess, actually the great milestone that I think every business needs to hit, which is profitability. And I know that I often say that, I guess when you talk to anyone like yourself who's not in SaaS, of course I need to be profitable. Honestly, SaaS companies typically take years to get to profitability. And so it is, and some of them never do. So that there's really a sort of, it's not obvious to say that profitable growth is the way ahead, but I'm a strong believer for us at this stage in the company's growth, that is where we need to be.
Good stuff, Mike. We've already touched upon this, but what about the biggest lessons learned so far?
I mean, I think it's trying to, I'll pick on 2. I think the first one is keeping agile. So, again, I think it's very easy to get into this mentality that we're kind of past the startup phase. We need to operationalize stuff. The stage of growth calls for more sort of managerial structure and so on and so on. But I think, again, the problem we've faced is that actually the market's changing fast, not only the partners we work with, but the other competitors we have. And I think we have to sort of, to carry on succeeding as a niche player, we have to sort of compete with the big boys by being faster moving. That's, I think, you've got to leverage. There are lots of disadvantages to having a small company, but you've got to leverage the advantage, which is moving fast. And so I think that's something we try to build back into the culture. We never lost entirely, but I think we maybe swung a bit too far. So saying, like this idea that we're hiring ahead of the curve and kind of, staffing up in some way. I think that can be very dangerous, because it actually leads to a culture where people feel like you've made it and we don't need to sort of, be making quick decisions anymore.
Yeah, it's a little false, isn't it? So we've touched upon competition there, right? How are you guys standing out in the marketplace?
Yeah, so I think, we lead on product quality. We want to be the highest quality product for doing this. There are other people who've copied the idea of server-side tracking and doing this for Shopify, but we want to be high quality. And that means, primarily in terms of the actual accuracy of the data and the richness of the data schema, but it also means in terms of, the ease of use of the product, being very easy to install, great customer support. So I think those are the 3 main things: deep product quality and technical excellence, ease of use, and great support.
I was going to say, is it the sort of without getting a demo, is it the sort of platform where, I don't know, a first time e-com founder, or maybe someone that's pushed through that revenue band that has historically done it all themselves, or they've hired out developers and now they want to bring it more in-house. Is it the sort of thing that can just be set up, activated quickly and quite easily on your own? You don't need any tech expertise, or you don't need a developer.
Correct. Yeah. I mean, you don't need a developer is the key thing. So it's a no-code solution exactly because most of the people we work with are in that stage. They've chosen Shopify because they don't want to have a tech team and all the overhead of that. So it needs to be plug and play. But I think obviously you need to have a certain level of knowledge about, kind of how the marketing channels work, which events you're sending where. But the idea is, yes, you can just install the app, click, add permissions, and then just add permissions to go and connect the marketing channel. So it does take about 10 minutes to set up. It's not, it's not a workflow tool. We're not trying to get people back every day to use Littledata, which has its challenges when it comes to retention. It is really a sort of configuration tool. You're going in there to set up the connections and then you're done. And the day-to-day experience is you in those marketing tools you're using, making use of the data. So it's the challenge of that is that people can forget about us. We call it a set and forget problem. Like they set it all up, it all works. But then maybe as staff change the company and so on, people forget that what it was that's making it work. And we're constantly trying to come up with sort of ways we can just prompt them, whether it's for our newsletter or in-app notifications or, emails saying, hey, we process this amount for you. It's just about being able to say we exist and we're still doing the job you got us for.
Yeah, good stuff. I think it's quite easy to do the set and forget. And all of a sudden you just lose a bit of contact with your account manager if you and it's great when it just works and you don't need that sort of hand holding. I suppose to prevent that churn, we've talked about churn. It is nice to have those touch points, just to make sure they're using all of the platform, because we do speak to lots of founders and lots of different verticals, and all these features, stacks, and all these sub menus. Unless people are using all of it, it can be like a bit of a waste of time, and they only use 20 to 30% of the platform. Of course, try not to overbuild and trying to get them to use as much of the platform as they possibly can to get the value would improve the retention.
It's also about word of mouth referral as well. Obviously, if they're kind of top of mind and it's a tool they sort of think about daily, they're much more likely to spontaneously refer you. And actually, a lot of our new businesses referral. So it is important that they're kind of ongoing aware of what we're doing.
Well, I was going to ask you, that leads me quite nicely onto your own growth and acquisition. Obviously, on Scaling with SaaS, we are of a growth mindset. We like to find out about what is working for you guys, how are you scaling, how are you adding more notes to the balance sheet? What is working for you guys right now? You mentioned referrals, but as we know, can be unpredictable and certainly not scalable. But what else are you guys doing to sort of to grow the balance sheet and the user base?
So I guess there's three sort of main channels that work for us historically. The first is basically content led. So people searching web for stuff around, like I've got this problem. As I said, it typically is around the sort of Google Analytics data is not right, Shopify to Google Analytics, these sort of keywords. And obviously there's we've over the years created lots of sort of content, both on our blog and Help Center about how to solve that problem and more recently on LinkedIn. So that creates a sort of what we think of inbound online. Sometimes hard to attribute, but definitely there. We obviously always ask customers when they install how they find out about us, and Google is the most common question. Second thing is agency partners. So we partner with a lot of agencies, both design and build agencies that are actually setting up the brand sites and kind of get asked like, okay, but I need to do these marketing and data integrations. How am I going to do that? And again, the answer, if they're an unscrupulous agency, is, that'll be another 10,000 on the build costs that for you, and we'll set up some complex Google Tag Manager thing. The answer should be, if they know us, is, this is a great app for that, and you can just install that, and it's just another couple of hundred a month. So that's one thing, but also with the marketing agencies, people who are actually managing the paid ads, particularly, but also the email marketing, they are basically improving their own services by adding our app. They're able to produce a better return on investment for the customer, and everyone's happy. So both those two have been good referral channels, but obviously they don't just come for free. You do need to spend time activating and educating.
Got you. What you mentioned there was three. What was the third one there, Edward? Was that the referral setup then, or was?
No, I think the third one is actually other tech partners. There's basically a whole load of other apps in the Shopify ecosystem that we integrate with or are compatible with. Some of those have been extremely good at sort of doing co-marketing with us, basically spreading the word. They're basically all fishing the same pool. They all have very exactly the ICP what we're looking for. So, well, I say they all have. The art of tech partnerships is figuring out which are the ones that have the very strong ICP overlap. But once you figure that out, then doing co-marketing with them, webinars with them, etc., can be a very good way of bringing in new customers.
Yep, certainly can. Yeah, so leveraging strategic partners, referrals, as well as creating your own content. And I've taken a quick look on your LinkedIn. You've got some great stuff on there. And anybody that's watching this, I would urge you to go and check out Edward's profile, 100%. So look, what are the goals for 2025, Edward? Even though at the time we're recording this, we're kind of coming up to the end of April.
Yeah.
What's the benchmark? Where do you guys need to be?
Yeah, so I think we need to continue to keep the growth up, and that means we've got to bring in a chunk of new business every month. I think talking about LinkedIn, we have doubled down on that as a channel, and I think and more generally pivoted the marketing budgets as fairly modest, but we've pivoted from paid ads was the majority of it 18 months ago. And we pivoted that entirely into kind of brand marketing and content, particularly video content on LinkedIn. And also pivoted towards my personal brand. Yeah, I think again that's something as a fairly sort of, I didn't start a SaaS business to be famous, but I do see that that's the way the modern world is going. Is that people want to believe in people, right? They want to, when we try and do LinkedIn marketing by our company account, no one follows a company on LinkedIn. It's not interesting, is it?
Not at all. I totally agree with that. And hopefully this is, hopefully this podcast will give you a pedestal as well, Edward, because it sounds like a fantastic platform. It really does. I mean, look, I love this question, right? It is a bit of a thought provoker, but look, just for today, you've got a magic wand. So if you could wave it against anything in the business to get yourself to the goal, to X in the revenue, what would you wave it against to get yourself there quicker?
Yeah, I'm going to go for retention. I know that's kind of annoying as a growth agency, but I think that the reason that is because honestly, like if we look back at the last few years, like the new businesses, is coming on, but if you actually were to bring retention, let's say half churn, that just gives you a base. You're just not having to replace that money every month. I think that's what I've learned about running a SaaS company is that you've got to have a certain level of net revenue retention to have a viable business, because you just simply cannot invest in the new customer acquisition unless you've got that base. And I think as I said, that dropped, for us, retention dropped, into this, I think in the 70% range, a couple of years ago, and that's not possible. It's not possible to run a business when you've got sort of 30-40% of it going out the door every year. Yeah, that's now back up to the high 90s, and that's where you need to be in a B2B SaaS company. And so I think it's got better, but if I had a magic wand, I would make it better still, because I think we have a great product. I think the marketing challenges are there, but it is all about investment at the end of the day. It's how much people and time can you put into getting the word out there.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to ask you what you were doing to fix that particular issue. Obviously, you said it was down to lower 70s, back up to sort of upper 90s. Now, for anybody that's watching this that could be going through the same issue, do you mind explaining or touching upon what you did?
Yeah. I mean, it's not one thing. It's that there is no magic bullet. I think some of it is about just basic product quality. Like, does this feel like the best app you could have? And that's true both for data quality and the user experience. I think we touched on it before about the kind of continuing to prove your value, needing to actually be able to communicate with those customers. No, because we don't have an expensive product, we can't afford to do account management with every client far from it, only the biggest ones. But we definitely need to do a lot of marketing automation, journey outreach to our current customers to keep them informed of what's going on and motivate them to, as you say, add the next feature. And then I think great support is part of that, being able to sort of empathize with the customers, understand what they're going. And finally, just being really, I think we've changed our whole kind of product culture back to probably where we were in the very early days, but being much more customer centric around what do people really care about here? Let's actually do a lot more research with what customers are struggling with in the wider sense and make sure our product's really attuned to their needs. So yeah, it's all of those things.
It's all of those things. Good stuff. Sometimes going back to basics and just keeping in touch with your customers, finding out their pain points and making sure the platform can deliver.
Yeah, and making sure they're aware that it's delivering on their pain points. Those are the things. And I think we've definitely been guilty in the past of building great software, but not, as you say, getting people to activate enough of it or be feeling like they're getting enough out of it.
Totally agree, 100%. So look, let's take a quick tilt to the future, right? What are the biggest opportunities in your space? What gets you really excited at the moment?
I mean, I think the evolution of AI is very exciting. I'm still on the fence about the commercial opportunities directly. I still think a lot of the value there will accrue to the sort of big tech giants that are investing in the infrastructure. But I think there's definitely opportunity there, and I think it's a must do in our world to follow what's going on and facilitate that. So I think I see that it's not like a short term thing for us, but over 5 years, AI is absolutely going to transform all of our lives. So we have to keep on top of that. And I think the other opportunity is I just see a kind of changing market where a lot of those VC-backed competitors that raised a ton of money in 2021 are falling away. They've run out of cash. They can't raise again. And so I see the kind of the playing field clearing and some really nice opportunities to use the kind of, the analogy to kick the ball upfield and run for it. Because I think there's just there's a lot less sort of melee in the middle now.
At the time of recording this, are some of your clients feeling the pinch of all this tariff talk?
Definitely currently on our company's minds. I mean, I think it's a mug's game to predict where that all ends up, but I definitely think we're a couple of businesses we're aware of that are very heavily impacted. All of their production in China, all of their consumption in America. That means they're basically paying 150% tax on everything, which is hard. And I think no business can survive more than doubling of their costs. And in this case, they currently pass those costs on to customers because they are a subscription business that has kind of like fixed pricing. There are some businesses that will be very hard hit. I think a lot of the companies we work with are kind of international enough to be able to work our way around it, on the geos, etc.
We can see what he's trying to do. Hopefully, if the glass is half full, you're going to get a lot more American-based e-commerce.
So, but there's a brilliant founder who was sort of illustrating this on a LinkedIn video last week about, just how long that takes. Okay, take Apple, for example. Apple knew about the China problem they had from Trump's first term. So this is going back 6 years. And in 6 years, they've managed to shift 20% of their manufacturing out of China. 20%. That's Apple, one of the world's biggest companies. So imagine if you're a small e-com company that has got one source, it's just not possible to switch suppliers and reshore into America. So maybe over 5-10 years, it brings manufacturing back. In the short term, all it does is just put businesses out of.
Yeah, that's it. It's that short-term gap, isn't it? But look, what would you do differently if you had to start again?
I mean, I think I wouldn't pick a different market and stuff. I think I'd probably go about the business in a slightly different way. Probably go, honestly, I would be less distracted by funding and just focus on product development and growth to market. I just think that, we live, one of the great advantages about the world we live in is you can build a great SaaS company without investment, as long as you're willing to take compromises on things like, getting your sleeves rolled up with the marketing, using channels like LinkedIn, which provide effectively a free route to market in some ways. And I think I've seen people do that and be very successful with it. Obviously, there's a huge amount of energy you have to inject into it. But I would say to any SaaS founder out there that funding doesn't necessarily solve your problems. It is, in some cases, essential just to get off the ground. But I think it can bring as many problems as it solves.
You've pretty much answered the next question, right? Which is about what advice would you give to other founders or the leaders within the SaaS space?
Just that bootstrap. Don't take the check because it seems easier or glamorous. I think the best quote I had from a very experienced VC is he said, "Do you want to be famous?" Because he said, "Venture capital won't make you rich; it'll just make you famous. You'll end up with 10% of a big business that people know about, rather than 100% of a small business which people don't know about." Simply the question is, do you want to be famous? If you do, then go and start the next Uber or whatever. You'll have column inches written about you. But you know what? If you just want to make a good outcome financially, keep the share of the business and keep us,
Unusual advice from a VC that would want to invest in your business. Okay, I mean, what about any developments, any news, any rollouts, anything cool that we should be aware of now for Littledata? Anything we need to keep our eyes on?
Yeah, I mean, I think you see some pretty cool stuff coming from us later this year with AI. I think in short term, the simple messages with the free Google Analytics connector. If you're a Shopify brand or brands, friends are trading on Shopify, we launched the free app exactly so people could have a totally kind of barrier-free, tariff-free way of getting this accurate data and getting started. And we hope that encourages brands to both enable their analysis, but then obviously in time upgrade to some of the other things that later can.
Good stuff. I think we'll try and grab ourselves a link or URL, maybe a demo link or something. We'll stick this in the description for you there, Edward. So look, let's just finish up with a quick fire round, right? Just say whatever comes into your head. I think I already know the answer to the first one, but best marketing channel right now?
LinkedIn.
Bing, there we go. One tool you couldn't live without?
Slack.
Yep. 100%. I fully agree with that one. I love Slack. Biggest mistake you've learned from, other than the funding thing, maybe?
Yeah, hiring ahead of the curve, like trying to sort of fill roles that are not desperately needed right now.
And what about the best piece of advice that you've ever received?
Get lean, stay lean.
Stay lean. Not only in the gym. Amazing.
Not only in the gym.
Edward, I am done, my man. That was a really cool, nice and snappy, deep, insightful interview there. So look, guys, if you're curious to find out more about Littledata or you'd like to speak to Edward about anything, we're going to put some links in the description. It'll be to Edward's handle on LinkedIn, as well as maybe a demo link, or maybe directly to the website for Littledata. But look, Edward, nothing more from me, my man. Listen, wishing you guys massive, massive success now over the next sort of 12 months and for 2025. Thank you very much, and hopefully speak to you again.
Thank you very much.
Cool. We're out. Take